Hello everyone, how you doing? I'm in Glasgow in Scotland and I was trying to get in to have a look at the Govan graving docks, which are these world leaders as they were in the late 1800s, because they were basically the biggest dry docks on the planet, and it all died out as industry has in this country, and in the 1980s it was done. Well, the reason I wanted to look at it is because they're building a brand new housing estate on it now, so it's going to be gone forever, just like our history is everywhere. But unfortunately I couldn't get in, so I've had to rely on a bit of drone footage, so that's what it looks like, but not for long, like I say, because they're going to get rid of it. So then I think, you know, it's that famous saying, he who controls the present controls the past, he controls the past controls the future. So how much of what we're told in terms of our history, you know, whether it be industrial history or religious history or whatever, is true? And how much of it is manipulated to make us believe and think in a certain way that will then control our perceptions and our behaviour now. And it does play a role. I mean, geez, even look at the Middle East. Like, you've got people basically excusing kids being blown to pieces based on stuff that was written in a book, God knows when, by God knows who, under God knows orders. Like, people say, you know, and this is not to mean to be offensive to people that are, you know, follow religions. Like, mate, you might be right, whatever. But I would ask the question, you know, when people say, oh, it's God's word. Says who? Like, who was taking notes? And then people say, oh, well, they found these texts. Yeah, okay, well, who put them there? Like, genuine question. I'm not trying to be offensive, you know, not that it should be offensive to have free speech, but it's 2025. Because I'll be honest, like, for me, like, I go on these walks now, and these attempted walks I've tried to do, and that started off, laughably, as an escape from the rabbit hole. So basically, I was, you know, particularly during COVID, I was speaking to, like, whistleblowers, you know, of the vaccine injured and bereaved, and you know, people that had lost loved ones to suicide, and so it was real dark stuff, obviously. And then, you know, you talk to survivors of satanic ritual abuse and stuff, and I have these conversations with a few people that do the same stuff that we do. It's hard, man. Like, unless you're totally void of empathy, like, there's no way you can't take that with you, that, you know, emotion and stuff, that you can't take it on. So my wife said to me, she said, oh, you've been watching these videos of these guys that, you know, go on these walks down old railway lines or old canals. I wanted to swap hands, but if I turn that around, I'm going to blind you. The sun's beautiful, actually. And, you know, old buildings and whatever, and you love those. Why don't you go and do them videos? Make that kind of thing, that kind of content. So you're doing what you enjoy, which is doing this kind of stuff, but it's not the heavy stuff that then, you know, affects you. Because, to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, there'd be a lot of times, like, I'd drive back from the studio, and I'd park up on the driveway, and I'd just sit there. And sometimes, like, my wife would look out the window and she's sort of like, you know, I'm home, but I'm not coming in the house. And for me, it's like I had to then sort of just get that emotion in check of stuff that you'd taken on from talking to people. Because when I walk in that door, I'm dad, and I'm not, you know, emotionally all over the shop dad for my kids. So I would have to breathe, and, you know, and then I'd come in, hey, it's Dad, how you doing? And so, yeah, she said to me, she said, go and do stuff that's just out, like, away from this. You know, I tell you what, I'm going to start walking. In fact, it doesn't matter where I walk, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to blind you either way. Right, I'm just going to keep walking in a circle then. But yeah, go do that. So I was like, do you know what? I'm going to. Like, Monday, that'll be my day. I'll go take my camera and my drone, and I'll just go out and find old stuff. And I love that. I'm a bit geeky when it comes to, like, old railways and canals and you know, old churches, you know, despite not being religious, like finding an old chapel that's like 800 years old, 900 years old in the woods or something, which I've done a couple of times before. That's amazing. Like, I love that stuff. Oh, mate, the sun's behind the building now. Like, I love that. And so I started making those videos, and it didn't take long, ladies and gentlemen, right, for me to basically be going into places, you know, whether it be viaducts or canal bridges or buildings, old churches, things like that. How you doing, mate? You all right? And things like that. And I'd be like, when was that built? It's like 1885. Bullshit. Like, no way. Like, this was built by, like, a few guys, and you're looking at stuff, you're going, well, they couldn't build that now. Like, they literally couldn't build that now. Not they won't build it now because it would use too much carbon or whatever bollocks. There's other reasons why they don't build nice stuff anymore. But for genuine reasons of they couldn't do it now. So how were they doing it then? And this isn't even things like the pyramids, do you know what I mean? And Machu Picchu and whatever stuff. This is just like viaducts. And then I seriously went down the rabbit hole, ladies and gentlemen, right? And it was quite literally. So a friend of mine, Phil, was like, you know, we've got access to these lead mines. Do you want to go down a lead mine? And I'll be honest with you, they're quite spicy. Like, they are a bit spicy. I'm not a fearful guy generally, but they are bloody dangerous. I know my wife doesn't like me going in them. Some of them you have to crawl in on your belly. And it is a bit claustrophobic and whatever. Anyway, you get in some of them guys, right? And they're like, this was built by sort of malnourished guys in the 1700s with pickaxes, right? They are freaking cathedrals, some of these places, mate. Once you're in them, and you're literally like, and you can see the marks on the wall. They're enormous. And then there's these walls within them. They're called deads. So basically what the story is that these people would explore a lead seam, sorry if I'm blinding you, would explore a lead seam, and then once they'd spent up all that, you know, lead basically, they'd get all the spoil and all the rocks and stuff that they dug out, and they just like fill it up. Just to basically say, guys, don't bother, if we've used it all. But that's not what they look like. These are like enormous, sometimes like 20-meter high, and they are stone, but they look like they've been cut by freaking lasers. Like they are like perfect. They're not rubble, and they are piled up to absolute perfection. And I'm there going, so a load of malnourished lads in the 1700s climbed up and put that rock, which is, some of them are probably like this size, enormous, for want of a more eloquent phrase, bullshit. So then you go, okay, well, what else is true then? Because if I'm in a lead mine and I'm being told that, and that's clearly nonsense, then that timeline doesn't really add up. So what other timelines don't add up? And I remember talking to Neil Oliver recently, and the interview we were doing was about digital ID, to be honest. I apologise for the wind now, it's quite windy. But the chat was about digital ID, to be honest. But I just said to him, I said, oh, just finally, Neil, like, because he knows I love going on these walks and stuff, and I've done an episode of the walk with him. I was like, what's your take on the timeline, essentially, of humanity, I guess, and history? Now, bear in mind, this is a guy who wrote the history of ancient Britain, right? So, and I said to him, I said, what's your take? Because I'm getting to a point now where I'm starting to think, it's all bollocks. Like, this happened at this time, that happened at that time, this was the technology that they had, this was the technology that they had. It doesn't make any sense. Like, the timeline doesn't work. And so if the timeline doesn't work in terms of what happened and when and how, then what else doesn't work? And some people might think, well, what does it matter? It was then, let's focus on the now. Well, unfortunately, what's happening now, even if you just take the Middle East, for instance, what's happening now is happening and being excused and justified by what we're told happened then, when we don't know what happened then. So do you get my point? How ridiculous that is when you actually look at it in that way. Whoop, a pigeon was going to fly at me then. So that's where I'm at now in terms of history. Sorry about the wind. In terms of history, and well, I don't believe any of it now. Like, I'm at that point now. I've reached it at 43, where I literally don't believe anything that I'm told. And this isn't just by people that I distrust, you know, like say Keir Starmer. If Keir Starmer tells me the time, I'm checking my watch. I mean just by the world in general. In terms of what was, done by who and done by whatever. I thought that was my phone then. It's the guy's phone. So for me now, despite the fact that my wife told me to start doing the walks and stuff to get away from the rabbit hole, I don't think it's in my DNA, ladies and gentlemen, as an Icke. Is that even my name? Do you know what I mean? I went to Germany and I was Icke. I don't know what I am. I think if I go to Denmark, I'm Icke. I prefer Icke, I've got to say. I would say if I was a movie star, because my middle name's Vaughan, my movie star name would be Vaughan G, because I'd keep the G, I'd have to keep it as an initial. Vaughan G Icke. starring Vaughan G. Icke as a weird guy walking around with a camera next to the Waverley. Look at that paddle steamer. My mum and dad took me on that when I was a kid on the Isle of Wight. Beautiful. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. But yeah, I'm at that point now where I'm like, do you know what? I don't think it's in my DNA to ignore the rabbit hole and actually try and do stuff that's away from it and escape from it. I tried that, and all I did was go down a lead mine and go, this is bullshit. And now I'm even more down, like, what are the ancient civilizations? Do you know what I mean? Well, when did they, was ancient Egypt actually in 1942? Like, what's going on? Maybe not that, but you get my point. Like, when things happened, how they happened, who did them? Like, is any of it real? And if it isn't, then why do we believe what we believe now? Because it all comes as a result of what we're told happened before. There isn't a final sort of full stop point to what I'm saying either, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just asking a question. What is real anymore? I don't know. Anyway, I'm gutted I couldn't get in there. It's over there. These amazing docks. I would have loved to have got in and made an episode. Maybe I'll get the drone up and make it anyway. Bit of voiceover. It's good enough for the BBC, which is actually that building there. It's all connected. See you later, folks. Have a great week.